Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He has very restless eyes, and her smile is very mild, with a reddish luster. See his beautiful fine hair is cascading down his back and over his shoulder. He has a newly invented smile, and she's compassion personified, and they're waiting for you. They're waiting for you. Waiting for you to go back home. They're waiting for you. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And they give themselves away, and they give themselves away, and they give, and they give, and they give themselves away. They're waiting for you, waiting for you to go back home. They're waiting for you. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Very good, mantra. So, why don't you do one song with more Hare Krishna mantra so we can always all chant along with you?
Should we do just one Hare Krishna melody? Just Kirtan melody?
Do you have any like with an introductory English words and then get into more Hare Krishna?
Yesterday we did in the jungle, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you did in the jungle yesterday.
I have let's see. I'm trying to think which other songs we haven't done. Chant with me.
Chant with me, yeah, chant with me.
Okay, yeah, we can do more Hare Krishna with that.
Yeah, do more Hare Krishna. We need more Hare Krishna mantra since we're all locked up.
Okay. When the night has come and the land are and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as as you chant with me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. If the sky that we look upon should tremble and fall, and the mountains should crumble into the sea, I won't cry, no, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you chant with me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Jai, go over there.
Very good. So that was the famous Maha Mantra from Bolivia. Unfortunately, you can't see him in person. And we're all in lockdown. I'm here in Nandi. Maha Mantra's in Suva,
Yes.
along with another devotee who's behind him, Adi Purush.
There he is.
You see Adi Purush? Adi Purush is from America, and he's disguised as a Cambridge PhD student, as a mild-mannered PhD student, and he's visiting Suva, and we got a lot of devotees here, even Gokul Bandhu. God knows where he is right now. I have absolutely no idea where he is. He's actually downstairs from where I am. So, and we're here in Nisoso in Fiji, which is an island, and it's a very beautiful place. Krishna just sent us to a very beautiful place until he whisks me away to the land of the free and the home of the brave. So that's a joke. So tonight we're going to read a little bit from another one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's works, which is connected with the Harinam Chintamani. It's known as the Nama Bhajana. And we'll be speaking about that for a few minutes, and we'll give everyone an opportunity, all those of you who are on Zoom. Of course, those of you who are on Facebook, you may not get this opportunity to ask questions about some of these topics. It's called Nama Bhajana. So read a little bit. Om Gana Timidandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuru Meditam Yena Tasmai Shi Gurave Namaha. So, prema alone is the purpose of the life of the jivas. Bhava, which is the soul's feeling, develops into prema, turning their face towards Krishna. The more the jivas progress, the more they approach the temple of prema. Thus, in considering the candidacy for prema, we meet at the outset with two kinds of circumstances. One is an intense longing for the unattained prema. The other is the stage where the pedestal of prema is already reached. There is no higher stage beyond the later one. An incessant rasa in an undivided, unique tattva of the region. So let me unpack that because it's a little difficult to understand. Incessant means that never ending, it continues. Rasa means taste, and undivided, unique tattva of that region means the spiritual situation, the spiritual tattva is spiritual. There's no actual material aspect to that tattva. Now, tattva basically means, let's see, I wonder why we're just seeing Mahamantra on the Facebook, but anyway, should see me. Anyway, do we put you on? Okay, now you see me. So anyway, so the tattva means it's a particular category, and that category is the spiritual category. Those devotees are again divided into two classes according to their love of seclusion. The first are called Vivekanandis, those who are close followers of the approved usages. I'll have to unpack all this. The others are known as Gosjanandis and are ever happy in preaching. Deep meditation on Godhead is the discipline of premi bhaktas, and glorification or singing the name of Krishna is their preaching. In other words, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is describing that there's two paths to reach prema bhakti. One path is the path of Gosjananandi, which means preaching Krishna consciousness. The other path is Bhajananandi, just to use a simpler term that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has used. And our path in the Krishna conscious movement is Gosjananandi, to reach out to others, because as Krishna says in the Gita, there is no one more dear to him than he or she who explains this Bhagavad Gita to the devotees and to everyone else. Okay, in the state where there is an intense longing for the unattained prema, the prema bhaktis are exclusively devoted to Krishna. Utter self-surrender marks them out. The Srimad Bhagavatam and the Gita have very highly praised such devotees. If a devotee does not take absolute shelter under the cool shed of the gracious feet of Krishna, why speak of prema? He remains quite in the dark, even about bhava. A self-surrendered devotee should only accept things that are favorable to prema bhakti and should deny everything, whatever it may be, that is antagonistic or unfavorable to it. So here Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going through the 6 surrendering principles which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. And I'll elaborate on them as Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes through them. The first surrendering principle is to accept everything favorable for serving Krishna. And the second surrendering principle, in other words, if something can be used to please Krishna, serve Krishna, it must be accepted. Of course, that's also called yukta vairagya, which means the renunciation of using things in Krishna's service. And the second surrendering principle is to reject everything that is not favorable to Krishna consciousness. And we see that Prabhupada was expert in doing this and expert in adjusting things according to time, place, and circumstance in regard to these two principles. Prabhupada adjusted even rituals or details that had been present in Vaishnava behavior for many, many years, understanding the ultimate goal and the ultimate principle of pleasing Krishna. So these are the two first surrendering principles. Second or third surrendering principle is that Krishna is the only protector, that nothing else or no one else but Krishna can save or protect him. He has not the least doubt that Krishna alone protects all. Devotees sincerely, well, here's the next surrender. Always protects one. It means that you use your intelligence too, which is your God-given intelligence, as Krishna says in the Gita, in the 15th chapter, Matak Smritir Jnanam Cha, that he's giving, I'm going to put this cloth over the light because it's really disturbing me. So he's giving the devotees and everyone intelligence, remembrance, and forgetfulness according to their desire. So Krishna's protection may take the form of your taking some strategy to protect yourself. In other words, one should not attempt to take shelter, one should not attempt to take service from Krishna in protecting yourself. You should make some endeavor. And I'll give you a practical example. In the case of Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami was residing on the banks of the Shamakund. And many of you know what Shamakund is. Shamakund is actually connected with Radhakund, and we're not going to tell the story about it now. But he was residing on the banks of Shamakund, and he was executing his bhajan. Now, one thing it's important to understand about Raghunath Das Goswami is that he was extremely renounced. In fact, he was the most renounced of all the Goswamis of Vrindavan in an external sense. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to show renunciation through Raghunath Das Goswami because Raghunath Das Goswami previously had been situated in a very wealthy family. So, sitting on the banks of the Shamakund, Raghunath Das Goswami was chanting the holy names of the Lord. However, Raghunath Das Goswami did not bother to protect himself. He actually sat out there, and there were tigers, there were all sorts of wild beasts. And in the middle of the summer, it was 50 degrees centigrade outside, and he was chanting under the sun. So he thought renunciation or dependence on Krishna meant that you would just like sit there under the sun and see if Krishna would protect you. And Krishna did in his particular case. Krishna, at one point or several times, was there with a stick to protect Raghunath Das Goswami from the tigers. And also, Radharani was there at one point or many points to protect Raghunath Das Goswami from the sun by covering Raghunath Das Goswami with her shawl. Now, this was discovered by Sanatana Goswami, how Raghunath Das Goswami was taking help from Krishna in this way, and taking help from Radharani in this way, or taking service to be more precise. And therefore, Sanatana Goswami chastised Raghunath Das Goswami. What did he say? We're supposed to serve Krishna and Radharani, not supposed to be served Bhajan Kutir, because he was encouraged to do so, in fact, ordered to do so by Sanatana Goswami. So you see, in that particular instance, being protected and maintained by Krishna meant that Raghunath Das Goswami had to make some effort. Similarly, we are dealing with this virus, so to be protected from this virus, it doesn't mean we simply chant the holy names and throw caution to the wind. We have to take adequate measures, distancing, wearing masks if we're going out in public, etc. So understanding that Krishna will always protect one means, first of all, using your intelligence, and then depending on Krishna after that. And understanding the intelligence comes from Krishna. There's another story that Prabhupada told in that regard. There was one gentleman who was convinced that God would always protect him. And so he didn't want to make any endeavor for his own protection. And what did he do? Once upon a time, there was a cyclone or a hurricane or a big flood, and the water started rising. And the water rose to, let's say, the doorway of his house. And a boat came. And the boat was, let's say, piloted by someone from the government. And the government officials said, please jump in this boat, we'll save you. And the man said, I'm taking shelter of God. I'm only going to be protected by God, not any mundane person like you. And so the water to the roof of the house, and the man was standing on the roof of the house. And the government sent a helicopter, and the helicopter lowered a rope, and the man on the helicopter, or the man on the rope, or through a megaphone, or whatever it was, said, please grab hold of this rope and you'll be saved. And the man said, no, I'm just taking shelter of God. God will protect me. So then the water rose and the poor man passed away. He died. Then after that, this poor man got to see God in his next life, somehow or other. And he said, my dear God, my dear Krishna, why didn't you protect me? And then what happened is that Krishna said to him, you fool, didn't you see the boat and the helicopter that I sent to protect you? So to be protected by Krishna means to make an endeavor, use your intelligence, and ultimately depend on Krishna. As we find in the Bhagavad Gita that there are 5 factors of action, and 4 of them are actually under your control. And one of those factors is Krishna, ultimately the super soul. So this is what it means to understand that Krishna is protecting you. So the next surrendering principle is to always be meek and humble, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, believe themselves to be very humble and insignificant. So this is another this is a very interesting question. No, I am lower than the straw in the street. I am the worst devotee. I'm horrible. I'm miserable. I'm useless. I'm hopeless. Sounds like you're ready to go to a doctor at this particular point. So how do you do that? You don't think less of yourself, but you think of yourself less. Simply. In other words, how do you think of yourself less? That's a real hard thing. You say, well, I shouldn't think of myself, but then your thoughts always go back to yourself. The more you try not to think of something, the more you actually think of that thing that you're trying not to think of. That's the problem. So instead, you think of Krishna's pleasure and you identify yourself as a servant, servant of a servant of a servant of the Lord who maintains the gopis in Vrindavan. Gopi Bharata Padakamala. Dasa dasa, dasa anudasa. And that's really what humility means. So sometimes humility means getting angry at someone if they're offending the Lord. It doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. And then the final surrendering principle is to have no separate interests other than the interest of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now we'll continue reading. Extremely self-surrendered devotees prefer Nama to every other feature of devotion. I'll explain what that means. That self-surrendered devotees take ultimate shelter, primary shelter of Krishna's names. That's what Sri Nama means. In relationship to every other aspect of devotional service. What are the other aspects? I think you all know that there are 9 aspects of devotional service. Shravanam and Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, etc. Well, the interesting thing is that all the 9 aspects other than Shravanam and Kirtanam depend on Shravanam and Kirtanam. Without doing your hearing, Shravanam, of course, means hearing. Kirtanam means chanting. Without hearing and chanting properly, that is Nama, and also the pastimes of Krishna, and the instructions of Krishna, and the pastimes of Krishna's pure devotee, and the instructions of Krishna's pure devotees. Without doing those 2, hearing and chanting, then you cannot do the other practices. The other practices will remain with mixed devotion at best if you don't do these 2 practices of hearing and chanting. So that's the pure devotees, self-surrendered devotees, are exclusively embracing Sri Nama as their first priority. And then everything else comes second. They have a more intense appetite for singing and meditating upon the holy name than for anything else. So if you don't have that intense appetite, your heart is steel framed according to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you get that intense appetite by associating with the pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. Because the pure devotees contain Krishna Prema and they have bhakti, they give bhakti to everyone. Krishna himself doesn't give bhakti. Pure devotees give bhakti. Of course, pure devotees are working under the jurisdiction of Srimati Radharani. So bhakti is independent. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this. Of all the means of bhajan, the name of Bhagawan is the most purely spiritual. In describing absolute duties, the Hari Bhakti Vilas has spoken of the glories of chanting and contemplating the holy name as best. It has been given the foremost place. The Shastras declare that there is not the least difference between Krishna and Krishna's name because the real nature of his name is spiritual. The holy name manifests himself as the Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha of Krishna. Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is here indirectly referring to this famous book, a famous verse, Namachintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, Purnashuddha Nityamukto, Vinatvam Namanamino. The name of Krishna is Chintamani. It's a desire tree, a desire stone, desire name. Namachintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. It's the form of all ras. Purna, it is complete. Shuddha, it is pure. Nityamukto, it is eternally liberated. And Vinatvam Namanamino, it is non-different from Krishna. So, those who desire to realize the form of Krishna and the form of the holy name must try to realize their own Chit Swarup. That means who you are in the spiritual world. The practicer of bhakti can never be dexterous in his adoration. That means good or expert in his adoration of God so long as he does not realize absolute truth. So how can he attain this object of pursuit? The attainment of an absolute conception of spiritual truths causes the bettering of bhajan. Here, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is using a different word, but I'm simplifying the English. Here we can say something on this subject. So many a time we have pointed out in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita with quotations from the Shastras that every jiva is a spiritual molecule, that the residence of Krishna is a spiritual kingdom, and that Krishna is the spiritual sun, that devotion to Krishna is a spiritual inclination, and that Krishna's name is Chid Rasa Vigraha. That means the eternal form of ras. Ras means taste. Now we venture to show the relation between spirit and those devotees who are extremely anxious for prema, and then we shall show the means to the attainment of the highest bliss of the soul. If we have spiritual merit earned in previous births, transcendental happiness will be kindled in our heart. We have no appetite, ruchi, for knowledge of Brahman, which is restricted to realization of merely chit only, for spiritual, sportive pastimes have no place in it. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that a devotee is not interested simply in Brahman realization because it's only realization of knowledge and, of course, Sat, eternity. And there's no spiritual, playful activities of Krishna contained in it. The savior of the Iron Age, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, declares the Vedas to be the only judge and reveals the 9 subject matters. There is a discussion on it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Vedas have proved the jivas to be spiritual atomic parts of the deity. Jivas are like rays from the sun, Krishna. So the spiritual form of the jivas must be identified with the spiritual form of Godhead. In other words, we are created in the image of God. And the soul is in the image of God, just smaller. But the difference lies in the fact that Krishna may be compared with the full sun, while the jivas are his innumerable rays. Krishna is Lord of Lords, the jivas are his eternal servants. There is no denying the fact that the residential home of Krishna is in the Pada Vyoma or Goloka, which is all spiritual, Vaikuntha, Chid, Jagat, etc., and all refer to that spiritual region. The Vajrasaneya Upanishad speaks of the form of Krishna to be purely spiritual. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad describes the eternal powers of Krishna, who is superior to the best and higher than the highest. And the Mundaka Upanishad shows bhakti to the Chidras and coming to conceive Krishna to be the life of lives, the wise after discarding all dry wisdom and vain arguments, and dives deeply to see the bottom of the soul. This is a little complicated here for those of you online. I'll just keep reading. Thereafter, realizing the deity by dint of pure intuition, run after devotion. He who does this is a Brahmin, that is a Vaishnava devotee of the Lord. Such has been shown to be the nature of bhakti or devotion. The Chandogya Upanishad says, O Maitreya, the soul alone is to be seen, heard, reflected, meditated upon, and realized by spiritual organs. All is then known to us beyond any doubt. That soul, Krishna, is dearer than one's son, dearer than wealth, for he is omniscient. Things that are sense-pleasing are never worth endearment. From the pleasure of the great soul, all joy proceeds. Thus, the eternal relation of happiness between Krishna and the jiva is prema. So, actually, it's let's take some questions on that now, because these are a little complicated spiritual subject matters. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in quite an erudite fashion. So I want to see if someone has any questions about these subject matters or any question about anything. Oh, Radhika Priya, you're online. Haribo. Good to see you. You got away from work. So who has a question? To speak up, unmute yourself. Does anyone have a question? Or is it just too complicated a subject matter for all of you?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Hi, Krishna
Haribo.
Full obeisances.
Not a problem. That's good.
Guru Maharaj, you said that Krishna, we are in the image of Krishna. And, and Krishna has the same form, but it is transcendental. But how does our soul look like? Is it a light or?
Is it a light? You want to be just a light eternally?
Yeah, that's what I want to know, how the soul looks like.
Your soul in the spiritual world looks like whatever your spiritual body is. Your spiritual body and the soul are non-different. In other words, your soul might look like Krishna's mother. Not that you cannot be Krishna's mother, but it may look like an elderly gopi, or maybe a young gopi, or it may look like a cowherd boy, or it may look like one of Krishna's servants, or maybe a tree, or maybe a cow. So that depends on what your particular relationship with Krishna is in the spiritual world.
So Gurudev, that indication that the soul is that spark of light, is it wrong to understand that way?
The soul is a spark of light, but the soul has a spiritual body, and the soul is not. The soul and the spiritual body are non-different in the spiritual world. You are your body in the spiritual world. You don't have a body, you are a body. Here in the material world, you have a body and you're not your body. So it's a little bit different. So the soul has a form. Right now, that form, as far as your vision is concerned, is covered up. And by the process of chanting, the process of bhakti, then that soul you begin to understand the nature of that soul. And gradually, of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this a little later in this chapter. Then after chanting Nam properly, then you get Rupa and Guna and Leela. You begin to understand Krishna's form. You begin to understand Krishna's qualities. And then you begin to understand Krishna's Leela. And you understand your own relationship to Krishna's Leela in the spiritual world. But this occurs at a later stage of bhakti. There's different stages in bhakti. Of course, practically all of us here, and hopefully I'm not insulting anybody, are on the stage of sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti has two aspects to it. There's Vaidhi and Raganuga. And then after sadhana bhakti, you get bhava bhakti. And after bhava bhakti, you get prema bhakti. And I'll explain what each one of those things means. So as far as sadhana means practice. And the first part of practice, which we mentioned before, Vaidhi, means you're practicing because of rules and regulations. Your spiritual master, who happens to be me, gave you certain rules and regulations, and Prabhupada, of course, gave you certain rules and regulations to follow. You know, the regular principles, chanting the rounds, offering your food to Krishna. And you're doing this out of a sense of understanding that if you follow the rules and regulations, you'll come to a higher stage. In other words, it shouldn't be done simply on the basis of thinking, these are rules and regulations, I have to follow the rules and regulations. It should be, there's a purpose to me following the rules and regulations. And that purpose is to come to a higher stage. When you're doing things for a purpose, then there's more enthusiasm. There's more fixity of mind. There's more determination. So we shouldn't be thinking of rules and regulations of just things that we follow. We should see them as stepping stone, as essential to achieve what we want. Just like sometimes young people are going to the university. Now, the university in and of itself, hopefully, is not the goal. Although some people become professional students, and I don't recommend that, but it's really not the goal. Going to the university means you can graduate, become a doctor or some other type of rascal, and sorry about that. That's an inside joke. You could become something so you can make money and achieve other purposes in life. So that keeps you enthusiastic in the university, even though sometimes you have to study things that you don't really like at that particular point, right? So it's the same thing with the sadhana bhakti, because, I mean, the Vaidhi bhakti, sorry. In the beginning, the rules and regulations may be like poison, and again, they become like nectar at the end. You know, chanting 16 rounds. Oh, we have to chant 16 rounds every day. But we realize we chant the 16 rounds in order to please Krishna, in order to come to a higher level of devotional service. And then by doing that, the chanting becomes more and more attractive, pleasurable. We achieve the stage of ruchi, or taste for chanting. Just like we were talking about yesterday, I was asking various devotees how many rounds they chant or chanted on Ekadashi. And practically very few devotees chanted a lot of rounds that I had talked to yesterday online like this. At most, it was 25. And I was surprised. Actually, if you have a taste, or if you want to have a taste, whenever you have time, especially if you're locked up like this, you're isolated like this, and if you're not doing a job, if you're doing a job, you have an excuse. Just chant 16 rounds. But you're not doing a job. Why can't you chant 64 rounds? Isn't it? On Ekadasi. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur made all of his disciples who stayed in the temple and didn't do anything else chant 64 rounds. Those went out and preached 16 rounds. So on Ekadasi, if you're not working, if you're not taking care of other things in life, you know, like little babies or something like that, then try to chant 64 rounds. And next time, if we have this conversation in the next Ekadasi, I'm going to be asking everybody. Probably nobody will show up for that class, but anyway. So to be nervous about that. I'll be asking them, you know, how many rounds did you chant? Did you chant 64 rounds? Or maybe even we'll do a japa session for part of the day online like this. I think that might be a good idea. We could do a japa. I was thinking, because I do a lot of my japa now on the beach in the morning, so we can do a japa session as I'm walking on the beach. Anyway, so that's Vaidhi Bhakti. Practice. And then the proof of the practice, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, that you develop a taste for it later on. But in the beginning, it may be a struggle. But then that's described by Krishna in the Gita. What in the transcendental happiness, or happiness in the mode of goodness, in the beginning may be like poison, at the end it's like nectar. And material happiness appears to be like nectar in the beginning, at the end it's like poison. So then after that Vaidhi Bhakti, we're going down through the whole process now. After Vaidhi Bhakti, then you get Raganuga Bhakti. And that's still sadhana, that's still practice. In Raganuga Bhakti, you're doing your practice spontaneously. Not only that, but you're getting an inkling of who you are in the spiritual world. And you're getting attracted to certain residents of the spiritual world, known as Nitya Parshadas, that means eternal associates of the Lord. and you want to serve them and follow in their footsteps. But that's a very high stage. I mean, even the second stage of practice is a very high stage. What to speak of the higher stages like bhava and prema. But many of us think we're on a very high stage of devotional service, but actually we're just doing practice, abiding practice. So the question is, how do we get to a higher stage? We have to practice and associate with the pure devotees and try to spread Krishna consciousness. Because the more you give Krishna consciousness to other people, the more you get yourself. All right, and then the next stage after that is Bhava Bhakti. Bhava Bhakti is something when you experience these emotions beginning with Vibhava, Anubhava, Sattvika Bhava, Sanchari Bhava, Sthai Bhava. I'll describe that very briefly. Vibhava means that which stimulates your emotion, like Krishna's peacock feather or Krishna directly. Udipana, Alambana, and Udipana. Anyway, don't have to remember those words. And Anubhava means the emotion that follows the stimulation, like dancing and rolling on the ground of ecstasy. Sattvika Bhava means the bhava that comes from the contact with the pure mode of goodness that you're experiencing in your heart. There's Asta Sattvika Bhava, there's a fold of those bhavas. And Sanchari Bhava means basically the intermittent ecstasies, the 33 intermittent ecstasies that occur that are uncontrollable. You can't even control them. And then finally, the last one is Sthai Bhava, that which connects you, the emotion that connects you with your eternal relationship with Krishna, like Dasharas, Sakyaras, Vatsalyaras, etc. And finally, Madhurya Ras. So, and then after Bhava Bhakti, then you get Prema Bhakti. So this is the progress that, or the different stages that we're going to be following as we progress in devotional service. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, another question. I took a long time to answer that question. Who else has a question?
Gurudev, can I ask a question?
Yes. Oh, that's
Guru,
Acharya. Acharya is in Europe. Does everyone remember Acharya? Those of you from New Zealand would remember Acharya. And he's with his American wife, Anuradha. I'm just joking. She's from Fiji. She's from Fiji originally and by way of New Zealand. Okay, what's the question, Acharya?
We were discussing yesterday a verse from first canto of Bhagavatam, the 5th chapter, Narada's instruction to Vyasadeva. And there was a verse where he is saying that one who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage.
Yes.
And so someone asked a question, what is this immature stage and what is a mature stage? So how does that, and related to the stages that you were talking about,
Okay. So immature stage means everything below prema. Because we were discussing about the different steps to achieve prema. That is the sadhana bhakti, which is Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti, and then Bhava Bhakti, and then Prema Bhakti. So one can even be at the stage of Bhava and deviate due to inattention. Of course, the typical example of that is Bharat Maharaj, who became attached to a deer. But nothing is lost. Actually, the Bhagavatam in the section that you're reading says, a better a moment in Krishna consciousness than a lifetime without Krishna consciousness. And the Bhagavatam describes that a lifetime without Krishna consciousness, and I'm just paraphrasing at this point, is like the lifetime of a tree. or the lifetime of a bellows, that means a pump for air, that just breathes and doesn't do anything else, or the beast's activities in eating, sleeping, and discharging semen. I mean, the Bhagavatam is very specific about that. So it's better to have one moment of Krishna consciousness, because that one moment of Krishna consciousness will ensure that you will never be lost. You will take up from that point in your next life. So immature stage basically means something that's not, the stage that's not mature. Maturity means Krishna prema. Does that answer the question? So be careful of Maya. As Prabhupada said, you Western boys and girls are not enough afraid of Maya. You know, people have to be very cautious in this material world of illusion. And actually, illusion doesn't mean another person is illusion. It means you're an illusion. I remember in the early days of the Krishna conscious movement, sometimes the young men who were attracted to young girls would blame the young girls for them being in Maya. Hey, Char, oh, there you are. Went to a different spot. So they would blame the young girls for them being in Maya. And one time, the brahmacharis in New York felt so strongly about that is that they told all the women they couldn't chant japa in the temple room. And so I remember visiting the New York temple one time in Brooklyn. And I came to the same block, and all the ladies were outside chanting japa, and all the men were inside chanting japa. And I said, why did they let the ladies in? And they said, we're not allowed to go in. And then Prabhupada heard about that, and Prabhupada got so angry and said that basically, if these men are so disturbed, they should go to the forest. But then there'd be no preaching there. So in other words, we should be careful of our own mind. The senses and the mind and the intelligence are the sitting places for this lust, not other people. Senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Oh, I think I lost them. They disappeared. Anyway, the senses, mind, and intelligence. Oh, there they. These little boxes keep switching around. So the senses, mind, and intelligence are the sitting places for that lust. And how do we control the senses, mind, and intelligence? We control the senses. Vacho vegam, manasagrota vegam, jiva vegam, mudra pashta vegam. By basically not accepting any more than necessary for maintaining this body together. You know, if you eat too much, your senses go out of control, for example. And the mind, how do we control our mind? Fixing it on Krishna, the spiritual master, Krishna's instructions. And the intelligence, figure out how to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. All right? Whoops.
Thank you very much, Gurudev.
Okay, one more question, and then we have to end for the evening.
Hi, Krishna Gurudev.
Oh, Shama.
Please accept my humble obeisance and all glory to Srila Prabhupada.
All glory to Prabhupada. Shama's in Nasori right now.
Yes. I had a question, Gurudev. You earlier talked about 9 stages of bhakti. Now,
9 processes of bhakti. Yeah.
Now, different people have different interests and something they're good at.
Right.
Now, what is the consequences of a person who's only able to sing and chant and not be able to do other processes?
He's only able to sing and chant, or hear and chant, you mean?
Yes, hear and chant.
That's what you mean, hear and chant. And not
Yes.
able to do anything else?
Yes.
Well, that's actually why we have a spiritual master. Because the spiritual master can engage us according to our psychophysical nature. And everyone has a different nature, right? Psychophysical nature means basically something akin to Varnashram. And so the spiritual master will see that this particular person can only hear and chant, and they will engage them accordingly so they can help spread Krishna consciousness by hearing and chanting. I mean, some people are good at deity worship, some people are not. Archana. I mean, I'll give you a funny example of this. You know, many years ago, and I hope no one's watching that was part of this whole scenario, but anyway, many years ago, I was doing deity worship. I was dressing the deities, you know, Radha and Krishna. And the other pujaris got so upset with the way I was dressing the deities that after I dressed the deities, they redressed the deities. So I understood that wasn't my service. So we're good at certain things. Each and every one of us has certain talents and propensities. Like Arjuna, his talent and propensity was to be a Kshatriya, protect others, and engage in martial arts. So by following his particular propensities, he could become perfect. However, he also had to hear and chant because he didn't know how to be a Kshatriya until he heard from Krishna. Otherwise, he would have deviated from his dharma. So hearing is essential. Some people take hearing and chanting as their primary service, which is fine, and other people will take deity worship or some other activity as their primary service. But hearing is essential to know how to do that service. Without hearing, I mean, just like you're a lawyer, unless you learn how to be a lawyer, how could you function as a lawyer? You know, you get up there in front of the judge and say, Judge, you know, I think this guy is innocent. Of course, you don't say anyone's innocent. She's a prosecutor. You would say, I think this guy's guilty. And the judge would say, why? That just feels like it, you know. He has a bad face, you know. So you basically had to learn the law before you could be a lawyer. So before you can serve Krishna in any capacity, you really have to learn the philosophy, especially we were talking yesterday about Sambandha Gyan, learning about the material world, spiritual world, the relationship with Krishna, the living entities with the material world, etc. One has to learn about these things and hear. So, good question. But if one can just hear and chant, I mean, sannyasis are just supposed to hear and chant, generally. They can still go back to Godhead. But hearing and chanting are actually necessary, completely necessary. Okay? Hearing and chanting, and following the order of the spiritual master insofar as one's service. Thank you very much, Shama. Any other quick questions before we end this evening? Nobody else has a question about any aspect of Krishna consciousness. Wow.
Guru Maharaj, please.
Yes, Draupadi.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Guru Maharaj, you mentioned in when you were doing Ram Katha that Hanuman is brahmachari.
Yes, a brahmachari.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that Makardhuj is Hanuman's son. Can you please elaborate?
That's a bogus story. That's not in the Valmiki Ramayana. There's so many stories they make up about Hanuman that are not in the authorized literatures. I know about that story. I mean,
Yeah, it said that Hanuman.
I know the story. I know the story. Yeah, when Hanuman was attacking in Brazil, Mahiravana, there was Hanuman's son there. Yeah, I know the whole story. But the point is, what Shastra do you have reference? Can you make a reference to any Shastra?
I'll go back to it and I'll message you, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, there's no bona fide Vedic Shastra
I
that has
think
that
it's
story.
the older version of Valmiki Ramayana.
No, it's not in the Valmiki Ramayana. I have the Sanskrit Valmiki Ramayana,
Okay. I'll let you know, Guru Maharaj.
but there's no story about Hanuman's son in the Valmiki
No, say
Ramayana.
that Hanuman went to extinguish the fire in the river.
I know the story. I know the story, but it's not there.
Okay. Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for clarifying.
It's not there. I mean, there's other stories too. I would like to tell those stories because they're really cool. Like the story of when Hanuman and Ram fought with each other. That's another story that's not there in the Valmiki Ramayana. Yeah, it's not that I'm unaware of these stories because I'm a Hanuman Bhakta and I've basically heard all the stories about Hanuman backwards and forwards. But when I'm speaking about, spiritual subject matters, I refer, as Prabhupada did, to Shastra. Shastra means the authorized Vedic literatures, in this particular case, the Valmiki Ramayana or the Puranas, which also have information about Hanuman and Sugriva and Bali and all those other nice stories like that. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
All right. Yeah, because I've actually studied the Valmiki Ramayana quite a bit, like over and over and over again.
Okay.
And that story is not there, although it's a popular story. It is quite a popular story, and many people have talked about it. But Hanuman is a brahmachari, and he's a good brahmachari, and he doesn't have time for anything else but to serve Sita and Ram. He's always there at Lord Ram's lotus feet.
Okay. Thank you. Guru
My favorite story about Hanuman, now that you brought up Hanuman, we'll just tell a story, is that once upon a time, Hanuman wanted to get some fruit, and he went to Sita Devi, and he asked for some fruit, but he saw that Sita Devi was actually putting some cinder on her hair. And she said, I'll get you some fruit when I'm finished with this. And Hanuman said, what is that stuff you're putting on your hair? And she said, cinder, and when I put it on my hair,
No voice.
so when he heard that, he disappeared for a little while. Then Sita Devi started to look for him when she finished putting the cinder on, and she couldn't find him, and all she saw was a red ball. And she said, is that you, Hanuman? And Hanuman said, yes, it's me. And she said, what have you done with yourself? And he said, I heard it was very auspicious for Lord Ram to put this all over the hair, and I have a lot of hair, and you just have very little hair. So we'll end with that story about Hanuman. Okay, on that happy note, we'll see everybody. We're going to try to do this every evening. Maybe tomorrow evening we'll pick something a little less sophisticated than the Namabhajana that we did tonight, because I'm afraid some of the words are maybe a little too big for non-English speakers. And so tomorrow we'll pick something easier, and we'll start at 6 o'clock Fiji time, which I believe is the same as New Zealand time now, because New Zealand has actually gone off daylight savings time. And whatever time you all are experiencing there in Europe, that's the time we'll be online. So thank you very much. All glory is to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.